Awesome. Well, thank you, Susan. Do I have permission to share my screen? Let me see. Does everybody see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Susan, this is a real pleasure. To meet your colleagues and to learn a little bit more. I think that my involvement with the community, as you'll sort of learn, kind of came from necessity. It came from the fact that that this space is really complicated, and I really salute all of you that are supporting those that are in relationship challenges, and certainly working in through divorce as well. It's a tough area, and I remember, and Dina certainly will appreciate this. When I was an appellate clerk back in the Stone Ages, that when we saw the appellate cases from all over New Jersey that came in, and obviously we're doing bench memos and writing judicial opinions. My law clerk, my judge, the appellate judge I worked for, always knew when I was working on a family law case. And she brought me in one day and she said, something, I don't think this is going to be the area for you. This is a really, really complicated area. And I was just married, and it's a very emotional area. And to be honest, as you're looking at sort of my journey, it's amazing that that I've been able to sort of continue to proceed in a different way. I mean, I had a practice before coming into this area, I was a commercial litigator, an in-house attorney, was involved in politics and run for office a couple of times. It had been a different kind of practice, always involved, I think, in the community, philanthropically, supporting organizations, etc. But again, life has a way of doing things, and I think that now, as a father of three, of a couple of neurodiverse kids, you have to be able to roll with things a little bit. And I've, been so grateful along the way, to recognize, the challenges that they face, and also realizing that our clients, as they continue to, trying to navigate and are certainly touching all of the, the actual challenges from the separation, divorce, and obviously moving through the planning issues that a number, that are working with, and obviously working with folks like Susan as well, to be able to take care of the emotional needs, etc. What gets forgotten about, so it seems, in a variety, and based on the conflict, and I think that's a place that we can provide that value, are the day-to-day. I mean, I'm just off an appointment right now, for our youngest, trying to make determinations about medication. These are big decisions. I just came from that, and I apologize for being a couple of minutes late. That's where I was. And having these telehealth appointments, and making sure that you're able to work with your medical providers, all of that becomes that much more challenging when you're in the midst of of relationship challenges, so it seems. And so we always need to be asking those questions and making sure that we're vulnerable, and available. And then again, recognizing, as we said in the outset, that we are in a village, and that's was discussed obviously in the introductions as well, to make sure that we're connecting folks, and with the various resources. So here they are. Here are the Kindle. It's a continuing journey, but I feel very blessed to have traveled and to be very open with with our path. And certainly I think that's why we connected so beautifully with Susan, and in terms of the different challenges that we have walked, again coming from that practice, And, looking at, a young woman, for example, right now that an incredible gift. But you'll see, in terms of the school, it was a real challenge. You see some of the comments on the screen, that we received, and they hurt. It hurts. It hurts as a child to hear those things. Third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade, moving up, and having these friendships being blamed for things. We knew something was wrong. We were on top of things, at least we thought. We had professionals that failed us through the process, therapists, and finally, again, you'll see that this is how we spent part of COVID, was, finally finding the right developmental pediatrician, and being able to look at all of this and actually making a diagnosis. For us, it was incredibly empowering. And, to be able to sort of to work her through that process was challenging, but it also provides you with the opportunity as a, again, to be an autistic young woman, to shepherd her through and to try to answer those questions. Obviously, it presents with anxiety in a tremendous, fashion, and but you're right. I mean, Ian had mentioned obviously the transitions in life, but having an IEP as a sophomore in high school, this is a high performing student, is a real challenge. And what does this mean, and those sorts of questions. My son, on the other hand, a little more classic with the boys, and these challenges are sort of raising. We knew kind of what to look for. But then we have additional questions. What happens? What kind of school would he need? What kind of supports are there? And those sorts of questions that are coming up. And of course, with all of us, these are things that are, even if they're not being brought up, they are being thought about, and by our clients, and just recognizing that, and also understanding that these worries are present, on a day-to-day basis. And so I feel that we have the opportunity as practitioners in this space, when things fall apart, to be able to quietly ask those questions, and to be able to, again, to establish the rapport with our clients and the trust, so that when things are falling down around, that we can obviously provide those, that level of support. But in order to do that, we also need to make sure that we have a responsibility, not just to our clients, but also to, to our the special needs community, to make sure that we have those relationships, that we can make those phone calls as necessary on behalf of our clients, to connect them with the resources if they're either not able, or again, are unaware of the myriad of supports that are available. It's a messy business. It's as my judge, my judge said all those years ago, it's a messy business that we do, and we really need to sort of come down, and and I love what Ian was mentioning before. Like, we're the crafter of these documents, right? We create these plans, whether it's financial or these legal plans. But we need to continue to remember that we are that resource. We are not the ones that are in trauma and in distress in going through. And so we just need to make sure that we're present, and sort of, being able to have that seat with them, and bring them through that journey, and even, if necessary, after, to make sure that our kids are taken care of, especially, my gosh, in this space with those with special needs, because we can be that anchor, and we need to embrace that role in the maelstrom of our clients' lives. So today, again, it's and these are things that perhaps hopefully many or all of us are doing. but it's worth, I think, an additional sort of reminder. It's that empathetic approach to the way that we take care of our clients. It's an act of listening, what they're saying and what they're not, in terms of their, in terms of their children and what they need. It's for you to ask these sorts of questions in terms of the day-to-day care, and to be present as a resource. And we'll discuss that a little bit more, in a few minutes. But to make sure that we truly are presenting, as a child-centric approach. And again, this comes up, in my practice all the time, in terms of, transition, which is a very scary time, as we know, for our families. In a lot of ways, I'm getting more and more questions. I'm not sure about, my colleagues, but in terms of that post-18 decision making and what to do. And I think states are finally starting to come around in terms of this. I serve on the State Bar Association Disability Rights Committee, and we are pushing for legislation, sort of as you see in the in that last, those last couple of bullets, to supportive decision making and alternatives to guardianship, because we're right. I think finally we're recognizing, the civil rights challenges and to just more traditional guardianship, conservatorship approaches, and making, it's really critical, for those kids, for those, young adults that have the capacity and the ability to have that relationship and to continue to empower without obviously developing the, placing them as a ward of the state, and, in a lot of ways. New York, for example, has certainly done a little of this in terms of their more flexible guardianships that have been created here in New York. But there's a lot more that we can do. For those that, and New York is not even as far as some other states, but they are sometimes less expensive, a supportive decision-making process, as you would, with a more formal guardianship. It's bringing in folks from, that are working with, to really understand the individual, the child, and what their wishes are, and creating that approach. Ideally, reaching to develop an agreement, this SDMA, between the disabled individual and the team about what and who can be in place. And this is really critical. And it is a, that is I feel, a child-centric way of empowering and ensuring that their wishes are respected, and may change throughout that process. So it's, again, I think for a lot, and I can only speak for, for a lot of colleagues locally, but it's a shift, in the way that we approach those with, with special needs, and again, having usually the two flavors of, a healthcare proxy and a power of attorney, these documents that are critically important. But, but if that approach wasn't appropriate, then sort of reflexively flipping back to a guardianship or a conservatorship or a court appointed. And I think, again, this is where we can provide that value, that advice, and I think make a real change, especially in light of the circumstances that the family is under. So oftentimes, it's important to be an advocate, not just, again, as I was referring to previously, for our families, but it's also to be an advocate generally for the special needs community. As Susan mentioned, right, I wear a lot of hats. I had interviewed for as a renewal on the board of the Bar Association locally, and I'm proud for attorney service. I'm relatively new to that area, and I had one of my colleagues who I've known forever, ask me on that call, on that Zoom call. He's like, Rob, you're everywhere. You're involved in so many different charities and philanthropies, and how and why, are you doing that, and how does that benefit the Bar Association? And my response is, it has to, it has to be done. We need to make sure that our clients, our communities that we serve in, all, we have so many states that are represented, even just on this call, understand that we are here. We are with you. We stand with you. And we are, fighting for our families and for change, throughout the community. I've received so much more than I've given. And you learn so much from the experience of so many. And I think from a local standpoint, whether if you're looking at it from just a pure business development approach, I want the phone to ring from other from clients, from other community members that sort of see you as just part of the community, and and an advocate for change. And for all everyone here, it's looking at the different organizations and where you can, and of course we're all busy and certainly over stressed, obviously, with respect to these things, but where can you provide that value and provide that time and passion? For me, I've been fortunate I was just appointed by New York's governor to a disability advisory council in New York State, and OPWDD is our agency, and services so many folks around the state, from housing, respite support, vocation, and it's just important to be out there. It's amazing how many times that this has been brought up when I'm in my conference room talking to a family and connecting them with those sorts of resources. It just because it's just about obviously creating that knowledge. So and obviously whether we're talking about a bar association, but financial planning, any of your your organization is it's working with our colleagues like we are here is how we're able to continue to kind of develop that. And again, to your families, I always say that I want that phone to ring when my family, when my clients, when my families or community members have questions, in some of these areas that I may not even have expertise in, but I know where the resource is. I have that have those relationships, and that's it's critical. What I think is important is that as clients are moving through this process and they're doing this planning, that again, it's just a complete overwhelm of information. We know that people aren't processing information in that way all at that time. I mean, again, I could speak to the planning space. There's a lot to do. So there's a long tail, on these sorts of questions. And so you want to make certain that, you're always available to be that resource, and to be able to make those connections across the discipline, and to continue to be involved in the families, even post-divorce. It will, again, continue to provide that authentic approach, and that again, that you're in it with them. So again, just looking at our community. I spoke obviously very generally, about diagnosis. By diagnosis, we're talking about special needs. That's a journey. That's a journey for many families in and of itself. And moving from point to point, and maybe even having that overall roadmap. The diagnosis can be empowering, to many families, and also to recognize. And I know a number of families do rely, and they're an important piece, on the school, to provide these sorts of diagnoses, but also recognizing that they're more limited. They're only, their assistance is only focused on the educational system and not generally on the whole child. So it's important to make sure that you're working also in concert with school-based and also private professionals to make sure that you're getting the correct diagnosis and the correct treatment, for folks. Mental health. again, when I say it takes a village, I can't tell you how many times, and again, this doesn't fall into our, specific, approach. I mean, we're, in my case, I'm an attorney, right? So I'm obviously trying to, provide that, that sort of planning service. But how many times that I ask when just looking at a, again, adult client, a caregiver for the, somebody with disabled, a disabled child, how are you doing? Like what, how is, are you taking care of yourself? Do you have those resources? These aren't easy conversations to have. These aren't conversations that I thought I'd be having, as a, as an attorney. But, we all embrace, I think, our role as counselor. And I think, the ability to be vulnerable in that space can really make a, a marked impact on our clients' well-being. So it's getting down there. And again, knowing these resources, we're very, very blessed here in Rockland County in the lower Hudson Valley, to have, tremendous resources in so many different areas, including in this space, and being able to make those referrals. I think one of the takeaways for all of us here, hopefully, is to ask the question and to make sure that we're, that we're vulnerable and asking those questions of our clients. Independent living is another, really, really critical piece that I've been very fortunate to be involved with locally. Here we call it the Rockland Independent Living Center, and it's called Bridges. But as you'll see, it's a shift that they're continuing to make to empower the voices of those that are, of our disabled folks, from a medical-based response, something that needs to be fixed, to a community-based. Providing the empowerment of of our disabled individuals to say what they need, when they need it, when they, et cetera, in a variety of different areas, vocation and housing, transportation. It's peer-to-peer. And I love that, it's also these organizations are throughout the community. I think there's 400 or 500 of them, throughout the country. And they're run by, a board of, as you see, 51% are, individuals with a disability. It's again a very eye-opening experience. And again, I am thinking again of a client that that's had challenges with a child with a very very specialized needs across the board, in and out of the hospital in terms of support. And even just the fact that you're raising these resources, it's been eye-opening. Having the conversation. They said, I never realized that there was support for vision, for example, locally, because you're so focused on the day-to-day and taking care of and making those connections. It completely changed the approach that they've taken, and then obviously it makes the whole planning process so much richer. Whether it could be by private pay or whether there are public benefits available, it makes it just makes the whole analysis there. Again, talking about here mental health as well. I'll say that it's again taking it out of the world of divorce for a second. Being a special, a parent of a disabled individual, especially if they are more moderately or severely affected, can be scary and isolating. It just can be. And so recognizing those signs and making the connection to families, support families, whether it's even just on social media, the communities are rich and they are, again, life-saving, not just for the child, but also for our caregivers. It needs to be front of mind. Because again, we may only be part of their life for a small slice of this and working them through, but obviously, there's a post-divorce world, and I think it's everybody's responsibility to make sure that we're taking care of each other. Also wanted to make a note of employment and vocational training that are, that these resources. In a lot of states, I know New York is certainly one of the, our support services, for example, through a service like OPWDD, may only be available to those that are really severely affected. But this, for example, has been a real, a tremendous resource. We call it Access VR. In some states, they call it vocational rehab. Providing other training for those with special needs and being able to kind of connect that in. They'll actually develop an individualized plan for employment, which I found with a lot of higher functioning, as they, I hate that phrase, higher functioning individuals, to be able to provide soft skills training. They may have resources for employers to hire, to hire folks to train the employers on, on what best practices are. Maybe that, employers may be concerned, and again, that's been a lot of my practice. Employers are very concerned about, they don't want to violate ADA, they don't want to violate other, other requirements, et cetera, and can provide that that bridge, especially for our kids as they move through transition, in high school, and then obviously beyond as well. That these resources can actually remain in place and can provide that. But again, I can tell you, a lot of my families have no idea that this resource even exists. Maybe it's included on a flyer. Maybe it's given to them by the student's guidance counselor on the way out. But it's in the world that we live in, in terms of just taking care of our kids, it gets lost. And this is an opportunity, as you're seeing and you're touching this, touching the family that are going through, again, mentioning these resources, at these appropriate times can really change your approach in terms of planning, and then obviously the children, the child's, frankly, their well-being and connection to resources. So just as a follow through, and I know that we're all doing as much as we can, and hopefully to continue to empathize. But a takeaway here, be that advocate for the community that that we all are in terms of our special needs, and again, to be a resource, not just to read the books, but also to make sure that we know that the folks that are going to be able to take care of our families, and that they know us, to know our story, especially in this space, and to make sure that we, again, can use that, and to be able to use that to provide that the vulnerability and to establish a rapport and a credibility, in the conference room, in going forward, and again, to empower all of us to ask that tough question, the question that that we would ask our loved ones, and to be where they are, even if it's just, are you okay? How are you doing? And if not, it's okay to not be, and to engage in that conversation, to make sure that we're taking care of the whole parent and the whole child in the space. So again, thank you so much. I'm going to not share now. I'm going to stop my share. There we go. And I really, I really appreciate